Welcome back to the 2023 Treating the Whole Person, Optimizing Wellness Conference. My name is Alexis Johnson, and I'm the social media manager here at RSDSA. I'm joined by Jim Roach, Executive Vice President and Director of RSDSA, and this evening's speaker, Bryan Pope. Bryan has spent the last 25 years developing a law practice that specializes in helping those who have been diagnosed with CRPS/RSD. He has represented clients in many states around the country, and I'll be sure to add those states into the chat so you can learn even more about him. As managing partner of the Cochran firm Dallas, Bryan has represented over 100 clients who have been diagnosed with CRPS/RSD and has a real understanding of the incredibly difficult struggle that they and their families and support teams have in dealing with this devastating condition. He has seen his clients have every type of treatment modality, including nerve blocks, spinal cord stimulation, ketamine, etc., and has a real understanding for the medicine involved in these types of treatments. Bryan has recently been selected to the RSDSA Board of Directors and looks forward to carrying the mission forward to provide support, education, and hope to all affected by the pain and disability of CRPS. And finally, I want to make sure I add this in here. Bryan has been selected for over 10 years in a row as a Texas super lawyer by his peers, an honor for only the top 5% of lawyers in the state of Texas. He has also been active as the president of the Dallas Trial Lawyers, an officer with the Texas Trial Lawyers, and on the board of governors of the American Association for Justice. So we are really excited to have Bryan back with us this evening. Now, I have a couple of announcements, but Jim, anything you want to mention before we let Bryan take it off?
I just wanted to say that on our YouTube channel, we have a number of presentations that Bryan has done, and that please check those out. They're really good. The other thing I want to say as we approach the end of this year and individuals select their charities to donate to, I hope that they would consider RSDSA as one of their favorite charities. And we could put a link up to donate during this presentation. And I just want to congratulate Bryan on the state of Texas winning the World Series. It was quite a feat. So
63 years of futility is over.
Wow. And one more note before we let Bryan take it over, of course, once again, it's the end of the year. So as you're thinking about purchasing gifts for your loved ones, make sure that you're heading over to our shop at rsds.org/shop. There's plenty of items in there, and I will put a link to that in the chat as well. But I think that's all the announcements we have for the beginning of this presentation. Bryan, it's all yours.
All right, guys. Like Jim said, I've got my other speeches I've given on how do you know whether you have a CRPS case, a legal case or not. I've got those on the YouTube channel that you can find. But tonight we're going to be talking about something that I'm assuming that everybody has been following very closely, and that is the Maya Kowalski trial down in Florida. Ironically, I agreed to do this talk months ago, even before the trial started. And ironically, we have now got to closing arguments. So without ado, let's get into it. I don't really want to go over in detail the actual mechanics of the trial. I know that there's plenty of you out there that have been watching the trial and have probably on a daily basis been taking notes, following the witnesses, the experts, the ebb and the flow of the trial. It's been quite a battle. It's been 2 months, and I can't imagine the toil that it's taken on the Kowalski family, especially Maya, as she lives her life listening to what people have to say about her, not only in glowing terms but also in not so glowing terms. Anytime you go to trial, it is somewhat daunting, and you can have somewhat emotional stress from it. I always say that, sometimes it's like victimizing twice. You have the original insult, and then you have, when you go to trial, it's like you're a victim again. So I think that there are some interesting lessons that we can draw from the story of Maya. Now, background of Maya is a Netflix documentary that was done and shown over the summer. It was one of the more popular documentaries that we saw on Netflix. There was a lot of buzz about what was going on with CRPS, how people were looking at it as far as the understanding of the condition. It was an opportunity. I visited with Jim Broach, our executive director. I said, this could go poorly, or this could go well, or let's see what happens. But this was an opportunity to put CRPS in a light that people had not seen before. It educated the public in a way that they had not been educated before, and I think that was quite a service that was done by the documentary. The documentary, it's not finished because it closed with the notion that trial was going to be around the corner. And finally, we got to trial. And it started in September, and it's gone about 2 months. And today, like I said, was the closing arguments. The story of Maya Kowalski is that she was a young woman or young girl who was 10 years old, was diagnosed with CRPS. Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick was the first one who was a main confirmation diagnosis of CRPS. Her mother, Beata Kowalski, is the unfortunate victim here, in addition to the family. And I'll explain that a little bit in a little bit. But Jack Kowalski is her father, and Kyle Kowalski was her older brother. So these are the Kowalskis, and the story of Take Care of Maya centers around the tragedy that happened to this family. The defendants in this case are Johns Hopkins All Children Hospital out of Sarasota, Florida. Dr. Sally Smith, who was a medical director for Pinellas County Child Protective Services, who at the time of Maya's admission to JH Hospital was a contract child abuse pediatrician. And then Kathy Beatty is a social worker at Johns Hopkins who was also involved in very controversial parts of the care of Maya. So, the background is Maya had, sometimes CRPS is not caused by trauma, believe it or not. From my perspective as an attorney, I can only help people if their CRPS has been caused by trauma, like an accident, a fall, a deep laceration, a cut, a fracture, something like that, or, very, very, very few times if there's a medical malpractice where a doctor did an unnecessary surgery and CRPS resulted because it's always foreseeable condition, or if during the procedure there was some type of botched procedure, a nerve was cut, something like that. But in this case, Maya's CRPS just kind of developed with the onset. She had some breathing problems back in July of 2015, and it just kind of escalated from there. And then, of course, Maya was taken to all kinds of different doctors and around the Florida area, around the country. Beata Kowalski, who is her mother, was an infusion nurse, and she was a fierce protector of Maya, the lioness of the family. And it was what Maya needed, which is what Beata was not going to give up until she figured out what was wrong with her daughter. There was a suggestion that she might have something called RSD, which of course is also CRPS. She did her homework and she found Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick, who is one of the preeminent pain doctors in the country on all things CRPS. Dr. Kirkpatrick did some initial ketamine, and it worked, but it didn't work to the point where it helped her enough. So he recommended that she try the ketamine coma treatment down in Mexico. Of course, it's not approved in the US, but with the right circumstances, the right patient, and the control that they have down there, it's something that can be helpful. And so Maya went down there with her mom. She had the ketamine coma treatment. It was difficult. There were times where she was having side effects from ketamine, and Beata Kowalski, kind of, it doesn't help her case eventually, but she memorialized it in a way that she was speaking with Maya's voice. And that actually came into play at the trial, talking about how scared she was, or how, she had short-term memory loss, or how she was hallucinating, and called it, that I had these magical superpowers. But she did successfully finish that treatment, and came back to the States and started treating with Dr. Hannah, who is another preeminent CRPS pain doc that RSDSA, is well aware of, and his literature can be found on the website as well. For some reason, and Gregory Anderson, the plaintiff's attorney, hammered this home today in closing arguments. Johns Hopkins decided to change the narrative of Maya Kowalski and her treatment for CRPS. She'd been to Johns Hopkins for several years, had probably 17 visits at least, where they diagnosed her with CRPS, and she was treated. And it wasn't challenged by the doctors that she didn't have it. But something happened. Beata, if you saw the documentary, she's Eastern European from Poland. She's very strong and forceful. And she wasn't about to let Johns Hopkins not give Maya the ketamine and the dosage that had been approved by her doctors and that she needed, because she was starting to have problems from not getting the ketamine while she was at the hospital. And for whatever reason, the staff in the hospital decided that the problem was Beata, and they decided to make her their target by trying to separate her from her daughter, so that they could then treat her the way that they felt she should be treated. And I'm really, really doing a simplistic review of this. You need to see the documentary to understand it better, or if you're really interested, watch some of the highlights of the trial testimony. But Dr. Sally Smith, who was the adult pediatrician for Pinellas County CPS, was called out to handle Beata because she was a problem. Well, Sally Smith, unbeknownst to the Kowalskis, looked through all the medical records and decided that she was going to come up with her own diagnosis, that she had a psychosomatic disorder, and eventually got to the Munchausen by proxy we'll talk about. And she was accused of Munchausen by proxy, saying that Beata was faking, was having Maya fake her symptoms, or even causing Maya to have those symptoms so that she could get treatment, and that Beata could get the attention that she so desired, which of course was nothing like what was going on. For 87 long days between October 7 of 2016 and January 7 of 2017, Maya was not allowed to see her mother. Obviously, this didn't go over well with her mother. She tried so many different times to get to see her daughter, to bring her daughter home, do the treatment that they had realized was working, had been prescribed and approved by doctors with expertise in CRPS. A social worker, Kathy Beatty, again, I don't have enough time to get into all of Kathy Beatty, but she played a big role. She was involved in the unwanted taking of pictures of Maya in various states of undress to try to show, what her skin looked like and things like that before she went to court for a hearing on whether she should continue to be in state custody at the hospital. There was some accusations that Kathy Beatty acted inappropriately with Maya and, had her sit in her lap and talked about how she might want to adopt Maya, just very, very inappropriate things. And as you can imagine, Beata became desperate and she was running out of options. It got so bad to the point that the hospital had the police investigate her for potential child abuse, and they interviewed Jack Kowalski, and really he didn't know or understand what the interview was about, and so he was a little bit more candid than he should be, and he said he was concerned that Beata was interfering with potential for Maya to be able to come home and to get further treatment that she needed, and that was becoming a problem. And so they drove a wedge between father and mother, between husband and wife, that was ultimately, probably started her down the path to the decision that she made. So on January the 7th of 2017, Beata Kowalski committed suicide by hanging herself in the family garage. Take Care of Maya, the title for the Netflix documentary, comes from her suicide note, where she said she didn't understand why people were treating her daughter the way that they were, including the judge and the state and the hospital and the staff. And she said, I love my daughter, and I'm just asking for someone to take care of Maya. That's kind of a summary of what her note was. And one of the themes of the trial, and we'll talk about it in a minute, was that Beata Kowalski felt like there was no way out. The maternal instinct to protect her child kicked in, and she realized that her child would never have anything close to a normal life or be able to come home even. Might even have to go to foster care as long as she was around and as long as she was trying to protect her daughter. So that's the tragic story of Maya Kowalski. The next chapter, Maya came home after Beata committed suicide. As predicted by Beata, without her as an impediment, there was no reason to keep Maya at the hospital anymore. She came home. She wasn't treated with ketamine when she got home because, the family didn't want to go down that route again and potentially have issues with being accused of child abuse and potentially state custody. So, Maya, to her credit, was determined to prove everyone wrong, and she got better. Over a period of time, she got better. I guess the stressors somewhat had been relieved from her, in confinement in the hospital. And, she's just a great young girl turned into a teenager, and, time passes and she got better. It doesn't mean that ketamine wouldn't have done the same thing in a faster way. It just means, that ketamine was not used going forward for her treatment. So it leaves us kind of with, what are the takeaways, or what were the themes at trial? And this is where, we start talking about what are we taking away from this. The plaintiff's attorneys wove a picture that it was a toxic culture at Johns Hopkins Hospital, that there was no one, Greg Anderson said, there's no one and the captain of the ship. And when there's no accountability from above, there's no accountability at below. And you have people like Sally Smith and Kathy Beatty basically going rogue with no one standing up to them or telling them what they're doing is wrong. Their ultimate, Beata was the lioness, like I said, who protected, in his words, Gregory's words, who protected her child fiercely, to the point where the maternal instinct was, a mom is going to throw herself in front of a speeding truck to save her child. Well, that's essentially what Beata did, was she threw herself in front of a speeding truck, which was this hospital and the state system, to save her child in the only way that she knew. But Beata had a plan, right? And the plan was for her to get her child treated by some of the best doctors in the country, using ketamine, which was what was working for her. And what ultimately happened was Johns Hopkins imposed their will, their decision-making over that of the parents on how to treat their child. And they imposed their idea of the standard of care for treatment for CRPS over that of these CRPS doctors who had come up with a plan with the family. And that's, to me, that's probably the most insulting part of this entire horrible, tragic story, is that this hospital felt like they needed to impose their will and impose their decision-making process over that and take it away from the parents and their child. And that is just wrong. And that's why this case means a lot to so many people and why the stakes are so high. So the hospital put on a vigorous defense. And, their theme, if you have a bumper sticker theme, guys, their theme was unnecessary and dangerous drugs were given at dangerous doses. That's what their theme was, that ketamine was unnecessary and it was given at a dangerous dose that, threatened her health and potentially, was something that would prevent her from being able to recover from CRPS. They said that the only evidence-based treatment should be used for CRPS based on, their experts, was physical therapy, occupational therapy, maybe some cognitive behavioral therapy, but no narcotics, and obviously no ketamine. Ketamine is not acceptable treatment for CRPS. That was one of their main themes, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because that has import to not only this trial and this story, but our CRPS community as a whole. And then, the ultimate insult is that we not only did we impose our will and our decision making, but we helped her get better. We took her off ketamine, Beata and Jack. We took her off ketamine and she got better. So you should trust us. And now look at her. And for those of you who watched or followed the trial, you know that there was a real controversial development the last week, and that was the plaintiff's attorney said that Maya couldn't attend trial for a day or two because she'd had a flare-up and she was in a lot of pain. Well, Maya also is, a teenager who wants to live a normal life as possible. You can't blame her. She goes to homecoming with her boyfriend because her boyfriend really wanted to go to homecoming and it was important to him. And she did it. And, she had according to the photographs that were obtained, I say they were spied on because they weren't obtained from the Kowalskis. They were obtained through friends, other, social media. they showed her having a good time and smiling and looking like a normal, healthy young teenager. The hospital used that today to say, if it was as bad as they say it is, and she needs all this future treatment, she needs all the ketamine in the future, and she's got all these problems where she's going to need future loss of earnings taken care of, and further medical treatment. If it's really that bad, then how's she having a good time at homecoming, and how has she gone, now 6 years without ketamine to get where she is now? And I think that's a classic misunderstanding of CRPS, which everyone in this community knows happens on a regular basis. So what are the insights and the takeaways? I was talking with Jim before we came on, and I mean, we were like, ketamine was under attack in this trial in a way that, in a very public way. I mean, you go to Court TV, Law and Crime Network, YouTube channels, the newspapers down there, national newspapers, and some of the headlines were, is ketamine a dangerous drug? Ketamine is under attack. I mean, we have some of the best experts in the country who testified at this trial. We had Dr. Kirkpatrick, we had Dr. Hannah, who were treaters, and we had Dr. Chopra, who did, of course, an independent examination and said that ketamine is what she needed, and explained it in such a great way to the jury. But it doesn't answer the question that is out there, which is ketamine going to be accepted for treatment for CRPS? I'm not sure that this is a step forward. I'm not sure a jury verdict really affects it one way or the other, but it's definitely out there in the public to be discussed. Not only is ketamine under attack, but I think unfortunately, this reiterates that CRPS is still misunderstood. It took Maya Kowalski, and this is back in 2015-16 timeframe, many doctors and hospitals to even get to the point where somebody like Dr. Kirkpatrick understood what was going on. The fact that the hospital today says, well, look at her, she looks good, totally misunderstands and misreads the room, that you can have a flare-up one day and you can be okay the next day. You can have better good days, worst bad days. It waxes, it wanes. I thought the plaintiff did a really good job of explaining that to the jury, and I hope the jury understands that, because the defense certainly mucked it up today. Advocacy can be criticized and attacked. This is probably a broader discussion, but if somebody had been less strong than Beata Kowalski and had not been as strident an advocate for her child, and maybe even, rub people the wrong way who had egos, this might never have happened. I mean, again, Gregory Anderson said in closing today, he said, if on the day that she went to the hospital on October the 7th of 2016, if on that day they had not taken a different tact and decided that they were going to address her from a psychosomatic standpoint instead of CRPS, which is what they had been doing for all those visits before, including 6 days before, if they just hadn't reacted to Beata in the way that they did and took it personal, basically, and took her on, this never would have happened. And that's the bottom line. You can be an advocate for yourself and for your loved ones, and I encourage you to do so. But just be aware that sometimes certain types of advocacy can be misconstrued and potentially lead to collateral damage that you don't expect or want. Just something to take into consideration. And look, take care of Maya. is what Beata said in her suicide note, and that's the name of the Netflix documentary. And I think that's something that we all take to heart, because, you know, once you see it or hear the story, you'll never forget it. And the haunting words of Beata, take care of Maya. But you can also see that she cared about her daughter so much that she took her own life. You know, the suicide disease, we call it, cost a loved one who didn't have CRPS, cost her life. So I would just encourage you, you know, take care of yourself and your loved ones. That's what Take Care of Maya is about. And don't be afraid of talking about your pain. And I always say this, and I mean it every time. Don't let CRPS define who you are. You define who you are. Okay. So that's pretty much what I have for right now. I'm loving to take questions and see if I can help people understand if there's, you know, some legal questions they might have. I'll be honest, I didn't watch every day of the trial. I wish I could have. I just didn't have time. I actually have other cases. A lot of them are CRPS cases to work on, and so I didn't have the time. I'd love to go back on it maybe over the holidays and watch it and really absorb what happened. But this is what I do, as I represent people who have CRPS. You know, we are the Cochran firm. We're the national CRPS RSD law firm. It's a family thing. We got all of our dogs involved in the process. You can see in these pictures, because it is important to my wife and I that we try to do what we can to help the CRPS warriors out there. So hopefully you got some insight from what I had to say as far as the Kowalski story, Take Care of Maya. It's not going away. In fact, you know, we're waiting on a jury verdict. And I will say this, I have a good feeling about this jury. The notes that came out at the end of today that were read by the judge indicated to me that the jury might be deliberating on the economic damages, because they were asking some questions that you wouldn't ask if you were just going to do a defense verdict. And the fact, from a trial lawyer standpoint, there is nothing worse, Jim, than having about 20 minutes after you're finished with your closing knock on the door saying that the jury's back, because that usually means a quick defense verdict. So the fact that they kept deliberating today, another 3.5, 4 hours they did today, and coming back tomorrow. If I'm the defense, I'm sweating a little bit tonight. I always kind of, after a day of trial, I kind of figure out whose shoes would I rather be in. And, you know, I think I'd rather be in the Kowalski family shoes tonight. But you never know. Tomorrow could be a different story. That's what's great about this thing being live. We have no idea what's going to happen. And when we know, maybe I'll have some more comments.
Thank you, Bryan.
Yes, thank you for all of that. And the questions are coming in quickly. So I'm going to start from the top, because we did have a few that came in the very beginning. So someone asked, is this a warning to us that we need to be more submissive in a hospital setting? Is there a way forward when we get the help we need without the worry of the same thing happening to us?
Well, I mean, I kind of hinted at that when I talked about advocacy can be criticized and attacked. I'm certainly not advocating people to be submissive in the hospital or clinical, treatment settings, but you just need to be aware. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that CRPS is still, even though it's accepted by medicine, it's still somewhat of a misunderstood disease, even by, as we know, doctors and hospitals. And, if you have it and you're, real strident, I mean, they might go, well, you're just crazy. And if you're a loved one and you're saying, I want to support my loved one who has it, they might say, well, you're being a little aggressive. But I don't know if it's a warning. Again, this could have been a very unique situation, because Beata was a force of personality. I mean, she was a strong woman and she didn't take no for an answer. And she was an infusion nurse. So, I mean, how dare they criticize or question her? But I think it's really a case by case basis. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but be an advocate. Just be aware that it does have consequences depending on what you might say.
Another question I have, and then I'll turn it over to you, Jim, because I'm sure you have a few. Do you think, and hopefully I didn't miss this, do you think the biggest problem that they made was that they took their eyes off the child and they put it on the parent, or they just didn't look at the child in the first place?
Something happened on October the 7th at that hospital to make Maya not so much the story as Beata. And so they focused their attention on separating mother and child. And then once they did that, they were determined to prove, I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, I'm a trial lawyer, so I'm an advocate, obviously, for my clients. But in my opinion, they tried to prove that they were right. And by doing that, they just, they made it more and more difficult for Beata and the Kowalski family.
Jim, what questions do you have?
I want to mention just about ketamine that our advocacy committee is really poised to really take on that ketamine is not covered by insurance, and that the VA, it's covered in the VA for CRPS, others chronic pain syndromes. It's covered for intractable depression and PTSD. So why not the civilian world? So we're reaching out to the FDA to talk about that we must change this, because as too many people know, that you go broke trying to pay for it. There's a lot of people profiteering from using ketamine via fusion for CRPS, where it is an incredibly cheap medicine. So that we're going to be working on that. I think the other thing is, a lot of times people in our community have had tremendous problems with advocacy in the emergency department. God forbid if you tell the doctor or PA or NP on duty what has helped you in the past, they tell you, we've gone to school, not you, and you're drug seeking. So it is a major problem about being assertive.
Yes, and I did.
Yeah, I think the point about ketamine is well taken, and hopefully, from my standpoint, I have a lot of clients who get ketamine. I would say the vast majority of them are fortunate in that they have the resources to get ketamine. And there are some doctors that will treat you under like a lien situation where, they'll agree to do the ketamine as long as they get paid on the back end when, there's a resolution of the lawsuit. But that doesn't apply to everybody, obviously. Not everybody has a lawsuit. In fact, very few people have a lawsuit as a result of getting CRPS. Yeah. So I am hopeful too, Jim, that we can get the ketamine approved. It is the height of arrogance, though, for a hospital like Johns Hopkins, which has a worldwide reputation. They're Johns Hopkins, by God, to impose their own treatment protocol on someone who has been treating with these experts in CRPS with something that was working. That is the height of arrogance, and in the context of depriving parents of that decision. I think, when the jury goes back, Jim, I just think that's going to stick with them, that this hospital has taken that right away from the parents. And as a result of that, she doesn't have one of her parents. I just think that sticks with them.
Yeah. I think, Bryan and Alexis, the other thing is RSDSA is trying to work with the National Organization of Rare Disorders and the Coalition Against Pediatric Pain to do a survey of other rare disease organizations, because it's not just happening, the medical kidnapping of children and Munchausen by syndrome by proxy, the accusations of mothers and fathers. It's happening all over the rare disease space, because there's 7,000 rare diseases, and most emergency departments and hospitals are not familiar with the vast majority of them.
Yeah, and they did talk about that in the documentary. Towards the end, there was that journalist in Florida who started looking into Sally Smith and other situations where she had asserted state control, and then beyond that, how's it around the country? Is this an endemic issue? And I think that should be explored out, not just within the context of CRPS, but like you said, for rare diseases.
Right. I also want to just give a shout out to Dr. Hanna, one of the experts on this trial. Dr. Hanna is really treated people with ketamine at a loss all these years. He's just a good, caring pain management doctor, and shout out to Dr. Hanna.
And Dr. Chopra, our friend Dr. Chopra did a great job communicating and teaching the jury about how hideously painful and debilitating CRPS is. He's so good at that, and I hope the jury understood.
Right.
But it is. I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing this, Jim, and I've been doing CRPS cases for over about 25 years now, but there's never been a moment like this that I know of where CRPS has been front and center in so much public light. And so, it's an opportunity for us to get the word out about how bad CRPS is, and hopefully getting people to sympathize more with those who haven't, and maybe even to put their dollars in for resources.
I hope so. I always talk about that pain research is only 2% of all healthcare dollars go into healthcare research dollars go into pain, and it's the number one reason you go to the doctor.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Another question.
Any other questions, Alexis?
Yeah.
I know YouTube would probably have a bunch of questions. They're the ones that are all the keyboard, soldiers out there.
Oh yeah. Someone asked, is it common for defense attorneys to use the all in their head defense?
Of course. That's the classic defense. It's all in your head. Their simplistic approach was, well, if you have social, psychosomatic, any kind of psychological issues, that's where you should focus on versus the CRPS. But we all know that CRPS has a psychological overlay, and that part of the protocol is that you get psychological counseling because you have depression, you have PTSD, you have brain fog, such from the medication and from the pain and the circle of not being able to sleep. You have brain fog that results in cognitive deficits that sometimes you need neurocognitive therapy. So yeah, okay, it's in the head, but you know what? It's also in my arm, and it's in my leg, and it's traveling, and it's on fire. You want to say it's in my head? Come on.
So I'm not sure if you can answer this question. I'm gonna shoot. It says, is Medicare more advantageous when it comes to ketamine claims? Private insurance less likely? ? I'm not sure.
It seems to me that
go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say that it seems to me that workers' comp can sometimes pays for it, and which is surprising because workers' comp is such a battle. And the other thing, Medicare can pay for it. It's all about the coding, and that, but it has paid for it in the past too.
Well, and so many people who have CRPS ultimately are Social Security disabled, and then they're eligible for Medicare, which could be a route to get ketamine if that's the case. But yeah, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Health, they ain't gonna pay for it.
Okay, here's another question. Is it common for the defense to come back with a doctor of their own to say that you absolutely do not have CRPS, just like Johns Hopkins did?
Yeah, but gosh, that's a dangerous tactic for Johns Hopkins in this case. You know why? because they billed the Kowalski's medical insurance $534,000 for treatment for CRPS while she was at the hospital for those 97 days. So for them to come back and say that she doesn't have CRPS is it's a little rich, isn't it? But yeah, in almost any trial, there are some cases that are so bad that the defense doctor, I have some of those, the defense doctor will say, it is CRPS, they meet the Budapest criteria, but yeah, it's just not as bad as some others. It's not as chronic as some others, and they don't really need all these modalities. If they just got therapy and work hardening and things like that, they'd be fine.
Right. Now, Jim, this is a question for you. This is a good one. There is a lack of continuing education for medical professionals regarding CRPS. What is being done to improve this on a national scale? Talk a little bit about, what we're doing here at RSDSA.
Okay. Well, basically, we have in the past done an accredited course for doctors and nurses on the diagnosis and treatment and management of CRPS. What we discovered that it's very difficult to bring a doctor in to get excited about this syndrome if they don't see people with this syndrome. That most doctors have never seen a case of CRPS. And that if you approach it saying that it's a rare disease, then why should they be interested? They might never see it. So we do have treatment guidelines. We've gone through 5 editions. That's on our website. We have a course for doctors and nurses. And we also have a pediatric course. And we also are willing to provide information. We have guidelines for emergency departments. We have guidelines for hospital guidelines, dental guidelines, home care guidelines, really to try to help medical professionals and caregivers to learn more about how this, can be managed more effectively. But again, Alexis, what I find so disturbing is that a veterinarian will have 75 hours of pain management where a physician will get less than 9 if they're lucky. So a lot of work still has to be done.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Jim. Here's another question from YouTube. I'm not sure what this acronym is. Hopefully, what about IME docs? How do you deal with them during litigation?
Independent medical examination, IME docs.
I knew you would know.
Those are my favorite. Usually they're biased. Usually I'm going to find some paperwork, literature, documents, speech, something that they've done that shows their bias. They're if they're true IME docs, then they're going to do an examination of my client. And I can't always get it, but I always try to get it videotaped because they tend to act as a deterrent. They tend to act a little bit better when they're on videotape, but not all jurisdictions will give you that. The IME docs, it just kind of depends on the case, but sometimes they can be the best thing for the plaintiff side, because a jury will get upset if it looks like they've gone out and hired a gun who will just say anything. And that's my goal with IME doctors, is to get them to admit their bias one way or the other. And it usually comes out.
This question has been asked a couple different times now. This is for either of you. Do you all have the ketamine infusion research studies or any of the medical journals that they refer to in court? And then if you do have them, of course, send them over. Then we can, put those into the chat on social, because apparently there were a lot.
I'll let Jim handle that, but I think most research on ketamine is on our rsds.org website.
Right.
It is, and then there's also a marvelous website called PubMed, which is the Library of Medicine. And if you go in ketamine for CRPS, you'll see there's a lot of articles that you could just have abstracts, but there's a lot of articles that you could print out for free. They have free access. So there's been about 2 studies that have proven that CRPS is efficacious. I mean, ketamine is efficacious for CRPS, but yet, it always comes back to more research must be done, which I think is BS. I think we're ready for it to be done.
Right. And I did put in the chat on both channels some of our most recent articles dealing with ketamine. So you can definitely scroll up to find those. And if you can't find them, I will post them again near the end, because I know there's a lot of chatter on both platforms. So here's another question. I know we're getting ready to wrap up in a little bit, but here's another question. Starts, I was saying, I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but how do you make an argument when you have doctors who diagnose you with CRPS versus doctors who may want to diagnose you with something else, like a conversion disorder? Don't know if there's a legal question here or not, but wanted to try it.
Well, I mean, if you haven't been diagnosed with CRPS yet, but maybe a physical therapist or an orthopedist or somebody suspects that you might have it, and you get a referral and you go, and this guy's like, this is a conversion disorder, then I might not, stick with that doctor because somebody's seeing something that this guy isn't. And I think it's simplistic to say conversion disorder without even going through, the criteria for CRPS. So I wouldn't trust them anyway. I'd trust them as far as I could throw them.
It's all in your head when they do that. And actually, Dr. Chopra has written an excellent article that we could put on our website later about how do you combat that conversion disorder.
Someone just asked, will you do a follow-up after the jury verdict and the trial comes in?
Sure. Why not?
All right.
Whatever vehicle we can do. Yeah, I'll have, it's not like I'm some legal commentator on, the trial of the century here, but yeah, I'd be happy to comment on whether that affects some of the takeaways and what the jury verdict means, if it's a good verdict or a bad verdict, and what it means to the community going forward.
Right. Someone asked, what is the best thing to do besides seeing doctors to prove you have CRPS if you are going to court?
Say that again. The best thing
what is the best thing
beyond seeing doctors?
Besides seeing physicians, physical therapists, to prove you have CRPS if you're planning to go to court?
Well, I mean, then you're kind of getting into evidence, which, I tell people, let's keep a pain journal. Every day, I want to know what your level of pain is and, what the nature of your pain is. I always talk to clients, putting it into my leg and pushing it around, whatever. I mean, I think there's ways that you can prove you have CRPS other than through medical. And you're the best person to do it. Take pictures when you have some type of discoloration. Take pictures that show your shiny skin. Take pictures that show your mottled nails. Take pictures that show your swelling. You can't take pictures showing temperature change, but you kind of get my drift. I mean, it's important. Whether your attorney tells you or not, it's important for you to document it so that you've got visual evidence as well as the medical evidence when you go to trial.
And this is somewhat of a follow-up. Someone else asked, is there anything that you see in successful CRPS cases that helps to win a case?
We have to have a great lawyer. I'm just kidding.
That's true.
The causation of CRPS is what's so important, and that's where the battles are really fought on causation. Is did what we did to the person who got injured, a fracture, a sprain, a laceration, did that cause the CRPS, or was there something that was latent? They were psychologically had some issues, and it wasn't our fault. We didn't cause the CRPS. to me, the cleanest case, and I think from an advocacy standpoint, you have to have a fairly clean case, because it is a misunderstood condition, and you got to have the right experts to explain it. But if you have somebody who gets in a car accident and they have a herniated disc in their neck, and they get surgery, as a result of that surgery, they develop CRPS in their right arm, and they didn't have any burning or any kind of temperature change or discoloration or anything like that before the surgery, then it's pretty easy to get the doctor who did the surgery say, hey, I'm not critical of you at all, but it's in the informed consent that says that you can develop complex regional pain syndrome, RSD, nerve damage, whatever, regional pain disorder. This was just a bad outcome, even though you didn't do anything wrong. CRPS is a foreseeable complication from a surgical procedure. So that's a clean-cut causation case. If somebody gets in a bad accident and they have nerve damage or sever a nerve, something like that, and you get CRPS, again, that's pretty easy. The harder ones are where somebody falls and they don't get a whole lot of treatment, and then 10 months, 12 months later, they start developing signs and symptoms of what could be CRPS. You have to have a really clean case. You have to have no intervening incidents, falls, or anything like that could potentially have triggered it. Those are tougher cases.
Yeah. So Bryan, I know we're on tape, but would you like to predict what you think the jury will say?
Well, I think it'll be a plaintiff's verdict. Now, what does that mean? They're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars, and under the right circumstances, I'm sure a jury in that part of Florida could deliver one. But it's still a fairly conservative venue, and they're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, I haven't seen all the evidence. I saw the closing arguments. I know what I kind of think about these. There's all kinds of stuff we didn't talk about, like false imprisonment and battery and things like that. I just don't know how the jury's going to handle all that. I think juries are smart. The fact that they're already asking about her earning capacity tells me that they're trying to do the right thing and give her some money. I guess I would say this. I would be shocked if the verdict was in excess of $100 million. I think, we're probably looking at more like 10 to 15 million total with all the damages. I hope I'm wrong. I hope these guys hit it out of the park. I hope they get justice for this family, because they have been mistreated. The legal system has been so difficult for them, and it would be an amazing closure for them to have a verdict that rings the bell, so that people around the country can take notice. And quite frankly, may we close on this, but a big verdict tomorrow or whenever it may be, may really help the people who are watching this, the people we try to help on a daily basis, maybe help them get to the next level as far as CRPS being an accepted, understood, and hopefully taken care of in the future condition.
Amen. Well said.
Yes.
That's my takeaway. Let's hope for a big verdict, and we'll revisit it.
Yes.
Yes.
So. Anything else, Jim?
No, I wanted to thank Bryan for analyzing this case for us, and maybe after the verdict, Bryan, we could do do a blog with you taping some comments. We'll put it up on our website.
Sure, you and I could even have a little conversation that we tape and then we put up on the website or the Facebook or whatever. Yeah. And I would be extremely remiss, I know she's watching, if I didn't thank my lovely wife Cheryl for not only the support she gives me to be able to do what I do and helping people with CRPS, but the nice little PowerPoint you saw. She got the slides at about an hour and a half before, and she did an amazing job putting together that presentation.
Yeah. And Bryan, just a shout out to your dogs who were
oh yeah,
yeah, great dogs.
They're great dogs. They whenever we have an opportunity, we wear the colors. So we'll get our bandanas on and get some pictures out for everybody for the CRPS Awareness Week.
Alexis, a shout out for what's tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah. So we have a double header tomorrow. So meet us back here on our social channels on Wednesday, November 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to kick off with a session called Karuna Home, or we're going to talk about the Karuna Home program, CRPS treatment success with Matthew Shears. I know he's going to bring a patient on as well. Then we'll have a quick break. And at 8:15 p.m. Eastern, we're going to go live with a session about Abbott's DRG therapy, understanding your options for targeted pain relief. And that's going to be with Dr. Dennis G. Patterson. So I have put that information in the chat. I will, of course, put up reminders on all of our channels tomorrow. But yeah, let us know if you have any questions. You all know where to find us. Send us an email at info@rsds.org. If you need help finding a physician, if you have any questions about joining us tomorrow night, if you want to write for our blog or just anything that you want to let us know, you can send us an email. You can also send us a message on any of our social platforms. But we look forward to seeing you tomorrow night and Thursday night as well. So everyone have a great one.
And I just put it in the chat, but if you have any further questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. And if you have any questions, from a legal standpoint about whether you have a case or not, again, I'm happy to answer and help you guys. That's what I do. bpope@cochranetexas.com. Jim, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about my passion and hopefully we have something good to talk about in the next coming days.
I couldn't believe it. Yep, I agree with it. Thanks again, everyone.
Yes, thank you.